Hey everyone, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today I'm going to talk about the Topping D30 Pro DAC. I reviewed the A30 Pro in the past. This is a $350 amp. Obviously, from the looks of it, you can tell it's designed to go with the D30. However, they use universal connections. There's nothing proprietary, so you can purchase either one separately. Now, both of these were sent to me for review by Apos Audio, more so to, I guess, allow me to cover a new product I haven't covered before, but also to experience their shipping and store process and all that. Apos, I've been kind of mentioning them a few times on the higher end audio stuff because they carry so many different brands. They carry Hi-Fi, Focal, Topping, obviously, Kanto, I mean, you name it, Odyssey. There's so many brands there, and they have a pretty reliable shipping process, return policy, and warranty. I like them because I've had a couple not so great experiences on Amazon, so I've been less inclined to purchase higher end audio gear from Amazon because of that. Usually they take care of you, but it's still a hassle. And if you're expecting something, you tend to not want to deal with the issues that could arise. So huge thanks to Apos. I will have links in the description below. So if you decide after the end of this review, you want to purchase either of these or other gear that I've mentioned in this video, because I will talk about a couple others that I like, you can do that and find it there. So big thanks again for the support. It won't affect what I say about the stack because I think there's pros and cons. So with that being said, let's dive in. Now, because this was sent to me as a review sample, not factory sealed, I got this after someone else finished their review. My remote was missing, so I couldn't include my feedback on the remote. However, it does simplify things. And I think the most useful part of that is if you're using this as a preamp DAC to connect to a power amplifier for your speakers, for example, the remote comes in handy there in addition to being able to switch inputs. However, it won't change the rest of the review. Just want to throw that out there before I dive in. Now, at retail price, the D30 Pro is an interesting price point. It's $400 and you get a relatively compact, simple DAC. There's no special things that's going to make it do all this crazy stuff to music. So I'm going to stick to a more basic approach with this review because this thing has been measured to the teeth by huge people online. You know, Amir from ASR, Audio Science Review, measured the daylights out of this. I don't have the equipment to do that, so if you can start with measurements, that's the better resource for that. I'm going to approach this more from like an everyday real world use case scenario for how I used it, what I noticed, how it paired with all different headphones. As you can see, this is the 6XX all the way to the HE1000 SE. And just how it performed. So at $400, it can be a little steep to some. Now, what I do like about the D30 and the A30 is the build quality. It feels like a tank. They're very solid. You have the all aluminum build. There's no plastic anywhere. Even the potentiometer or pot on the A30 is amazing. Talk about channel balance. But with the D30, you have this really nice orange display, and it changes obviously depending on what you're doing. You can tap it once to cycle through inputs, double tap to change the output mode. And I like that they kept those two as the primary functions of the button press. The rest I'll show you how to go through on a menu. And it has, as far as connectivity goes, you can go with USB, so you can use this as a USB DAC for your computer, which of course does work on Windows and Mac. It has an optical input and it has a coaxial input as well. Very easy to toggle. Again, just press the button on it. So, and then on the output side, I'll show you some close-ups in a moment here, but you have XLR and you have RCA. The RCA is a 2-volt RMS output and the XLR is a 4 volts. So if you want to get the most out of your amp, typically you'll want to use XLR just because you usually get a higher output signal. And that'll give you more power if you so need it. Now, the A30 is rated at some pretty intense power, but they kind of cheated the numbers a little bit because they fed it a 5-volt signal to get over 6 watts at 32 ohms. On normal output, it's more comparable to what you'd expect at this price range. And right now, it's on sale for $250, so it still has excellent power at that price point. I do want to mention the packages. So retail, this would be $750 for just the 2 units. Now, right now, for $580, you can get the entire stack with an Apos Audio XLR cable, the Flow, which is a beautiful braided cable. And then I believe it's $780. You can get it with all three, you know, the stack, the XLR cable, plus the Topping aluminum rack, which looks really cool. So because of the sale prices, you actually get quite a bit. Now, I just want to talk about the other inputs real quick. The coaxial and optical input don't have the best jitter rejection properties. So depending on what kind of CD player you're using, whether it has a certain output buffer or not, a lot of CD players are going to have issues with this stack. So if you're using it primarily as a CD player DAC, honestly, there are better options out there. It's more likely you'll have less issues with certain other DACs. For this one, it's not so much known for CD performance. How I use it is like 95% of the time is as a USB DAC, because I'm connecting it to my desktop, which is behind the camera, and I got a much better experience there. And as you can tell, it's showing you the sample rate. I have to wake up my computer for it. Hopefully that will pop back up here. Yeah, so I'm at 88.2 kilohertz. Now this does DSD. It goes up to 384 kilohertz, so you have a huge amount of sample rate depth. There's no hardware MQA encoding, which is honest, or decoding, which I think is a good thing. That's a preference thing. So I flashed the firmware to this. I'm on version 2.46 at the time of this review. I didn't really notice any change from 2.45, which is what the my unit came with. And the flashing process was relatively easy. It only took me a minute. It did reset all my controls. So I'm going to talk about audio performance soon, but it's really important to me that I explain this control process because I learned a couple things the hard way. The manual doesn't quite explain everything as clearly as I had hoped. So let's start with the basics. Now I'm going to point this up. I think that might be an easier way to see everything. So if I press this once, the knob on it, I'm changing inputs, and now it says optical. And if I press it again, now it says coax, and press it again to go back to USB. If I double press, now it says output 1. That means the only output coming out of this is through the RCA. If I press it again, now the only output is going out through the XLR. And O3 for output mode 3 means that I'm sending the signal out via RCA and XLR. I think that's a cool feature because if you have an amplifier, let's say you're using this as a preamp as well and not just a DAC, and I'll show you how to get into that. Setting it to output 3 means that this volume now is controlling the output volume that maybe a powerful amplifier is playing connected to your speakers. But if you want to disconnect that signal, you can switch to just output 3 and go back to your stack for headphone listening. So you have the ability to do both. Now, I always use it in DAC mode because I pretty much use this as a headphone stack. However, I did connect it to my PS Audio amp just to try it. And I didn't notice a massive difference. The PS Audio Strata is like a $3,000 amp DAC, integrated amp, so I didn't expect a major change, and that was the case. However, I just wanted to test the preamp, and the preamp worked totally fine. It's a negative gain, so at 0, it's full volume. Now, I want to show you how to get into the settings to change the preamp mode. So what you have to do, there's a power switch on the back. Did I get that on camera? Let's see. Let's see if I can angle this a little bit better while I'm plugged in. So this guy right here, if you have the DAC off, while it's physically switched off on the back, not asleep from the front, press and hold. You can hear that nice click. It feels really nice, by the way. So press and hold, then flick the power switch on in the back. Now you can see it says F2. So this leads me to my next discussion. This thing has 9 output filters. Yes, 9. I'm going to tell you that if anyone tells you that they can hear the difference between all 9, I don't know if there's some golden ears out there that really can tell outside of measurements, but I would consider that more placebo than a medical experiment. That's crazy to me. Most of them sounded the same. Now, I do want to point out 3 specific filters. So filter 2 is the default. It's basically a fast filter, and it has a more linear response. The default one is pretty much what anyone needs. Filter 5 is no oversampling enabled, and filter 9 is a brick wall filter. So from a measurement standpoint, I believe filter 9 measured the best. However, from a listening standpoint, I had a couple minor nuances and changes with how it felt from like warmth and more of I don't want to say a reverb, but I think because it thinned out, it sounded a little bit more spacious, but I missed some of the warmth I got from the default filter. You're talking a really minor change, but a lot of them sounded the same to me. So I'm just going to be honest and not kid or lie to you. So I left it on filter 2. I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's go back to this. So L2, this is the brightness level. So you can see the screen getting dimmer or brighter, hopefully, right? Yeah. I leave it on 2. And then this is your auto off feature. You have a function that's going to turn on and off automatically or just off automatically. And then this is the output, again, the default output mode. So I'm going to leave it on 3, so I'm sending a signal out on both at the same time. And I'm reading this upside down. Okay, so this is the mode. Now you have DAC and preamp. So when you switch to preamp, you are now going to have a volume control built into the DAC. And if you turn it all the way up to 0, that's basically the same as DAC mode when it's connected to an amplifier like this. And then we're back to filter. To save it, just press and hold. Now we're saved. I'm going to turn it back on. And here we go. Actually, you know what? Let's. I'm going to enable DAC or preamp mode so you can see what that looks like too. I thought I had it, but I was looking at it upside down. So go figure. So let's go back here. Okay. I'm going to save it. Might as well do it in real time so you don't think I'm like pulling anything. So that is the way to do it. And now it says preamp. And you can see the volume settings here. So I'm turning it way, way down, and you can see it drop. And then obviously this is going to be your full volume. So be careful if you're connecting this to an external amplifier, and check your volume levels and assume that and don't just assume that you're set correctly prior to turning on a power amp, for example, that has a fixed output volume. So let's talk about my experience with it. That covers the specs to an extent. Like I said, there's more available online. You don't buy this stack to have special sauce added to your audio mix. You're not adding flavor to a track and increasing warmth or airiness on the soundstage. This is fairly dark. It's clean. It's transparent. The reason why you get a topping stack is because you don't want the stack to do anything to the audio. You want it clean in, clean out from the DAC to the amp. And in this particular case, this amp is very neutral as well. So with certain headphones, for example, the HD6XX is not a very open, airy sounding headphone. It's a more intimate listen. This isn't going to make that thing shine and expand and grow in space in your head. It's going to play to the way that 6XX sounds out of the box. The way I guess this default sound signature is of it. The same thing happens with the HE1000 SE, which is known to have a more airy, open soundstage. It sounds incredible. This is one of my favorite headphones of all time. This isn't taking away that soundstage. It's not neutering the capability of the headphone. It's not adding warmth or extra soundstage to it. But again, this is kind of one of those things where some people may consider it boring, but the good thing about this market is you can buy the stack that does what you want. This stack is not for everybody, but there are some people out there that don't care about all this extra coloring of the sound. They're not looking at tube amps and DACs and all that. They want transparent, flat, dark. There is no noise from this. Like, if there's one thing that stood out is I can go full volume, 6-watt output, but I can absolutely crank this with everything paused, and I hear nothing. It is so clean from beginning to end. And if you wouldn't even know your volume is turned up that loud. Some things you can really tell it's cranked up. And this, you have no idea. It's dark. It's really nice with certain music. If you're listening to classical music, this is a great amp DAC for that, because the output level, the recording level of classical isn't really that loud typically. The overall decibel output's a bit lower. So you want that overhead, and you might end up at like the 12 o'clock position on high, the high gain switch. Even on a more sensitive headphone, you might have it really cranked because the track is quiet. What's nice about a stack like this is now you're not adding extra hiss or issues or artifacts to the song. It still stays incredibly neutral and clean, and that's going to give you a more rewarding experience on that music. So I love it for what it is. I don't expect it to do certain things, special things that it's not designed to do. And if you go into that with that mindset, I think you'll be really happy with the stack. Again, it's not for everybody. You can always EQ things if you want certain frequency response characteristics, but I've been really happy with it. Honestly, it's just one of those things where, okay, nothing special, but it's gone. Your signal is clean as possible and loud. Now, how I would compare this to a couple others. So there's the hifi EF400 amp DAC. I reviewed that fairly recently. That one was a little more fun to listen to for me. It's not as silent as this. The potentiometer of this is better as far as channel balance goes. I had a more noticeable channel imbalance with the EF400. However, because that R2R Himalaya DAC that hifi put inside, it adds a little special, just a little taste of something to the music. It's for the HE1000 SE, for the Aria Stealth, for the Sundara even. I think it was a little bit more enjoyable for me because I wouldn't have to EQ anything. It's just really fun to listen to, and I like having that little extra warmth and weight to the song without making it like distorted or unclear either. It's just very minor and tastefully done. And then you have something like the iFi Zen signature stack that I reviewed. I like the iFi stack as well. It's fairly clean. It has the preset button on it. However, with something like this is just a more versatile stack for a comparable price. I love these built like a tank toggle switches. Everything feels solid. Again, the potentiometer on this is so good. It's the best pot I've used under $1,000 as far as like channel balance goes. Even though on high gain, when you have this on 0, you can still hear it, and on medium gain, you can still hear some of the music a little bit as well. But it's not imbalanced even at 0, which is pretty impressive. So, you know, it's versatile. It has the inputs, all 3 inputs. It has the multiple output options. And then when you compare it to something like this, which even has an RCA bypass, so when it's off, you can send the signal back out. I would use XLR with this stack. It's noticeably louder. Is it more clean? You can't really tell the difference. It's really just if you want the higher signal output, which you're paying for this, you might as well throw in the XLR cable to get the most of it. So yeah, that's my experience. I did enjoy it. Now, I think Shit Audio has some really compelling stuff for a little bit less money if you just want something that's flat and transparent. However, there's no getting around how nice that screen is and how good everything feels. They work incredibly well. The power supplies are built in, so there's no external brick or anything like you get with the THX 887 amp from Monoprice, for example. So it's just a really compact chassis. I liked it a lot, and I hope that after watching this review, you kind of get a better feel for the stack. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions, shoot me a comment. I'll do my best to answer it. Hopefully you learned something new about this guy today, and I will see you next time. Bye.